Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Right into it. We got a busy day and lots to get to. This first hour, a little bit later on, maybe you've heard, maybe you haven't, but the United States boarded a Venezuelan oil tanker earlier today and seized it. What exactly does that mean? Why are we going after Venezuelan oil tankers? We have former, or retired, I should say, CIA senior operations officer and a Latin American expert on exactly what is going on. That's a little bit later on. Hour number 2, James Bradley wrote a book years ago called Flags of Our Fathers, and his father was one of the men who raised that famous flag on Iwo Jima, that picture that won the Pulitzer Prize. He has a brand new novel out. We'll talk with James Bradley a little bit later on. But this first half hour, you heard recently that President Trump announced that he is going to allow NVIDIA to sell chips to China. A lot of backlash, a lot of Democratic backlash, not surprising, but quite a number of Republicans questioning the move. That's all part of the artificial intelligence push in this country. And one of the big things is data centers. And one of the big things with data centers is energy. And what in the world is going on with energy prices? I know people are opening up their energy bills and the prices are going up. And so we thought we'd find out more. Ben Geman is with Axios, and he is their energy reporter, and he's going to spend a couple minutes with us tonight. Ben, thanks for joining us here on America at Night.
Thanks so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
You got it. So let's start with AI, and a lot of people are sort of just waking up to what these data centers are and that they suck massive amounts of energy. People are already concerned about energy and energy prices going up. How do you see this news with NVIDIA, but more importantly, how do you see the sort of overall energy conversation going on in this country? Are people really aware of what's actually about to happen with these data centers?
I think they are increasingly aware of it, in part because it is becoming a very live topic politically, right? I mean, the politics of energy prices cut in a couple of different directions. So I'll be very curious to see, whether this generally accrues to the benefit of Democrats or Republicans. I mean, typically, an increase in price of anything is going to kind of, politically help the party that is out of power. But here's the thing. U.S. electricity prices are rising generally speaking, but gasoline prices, are falling, right? And so I think people are generally a little bit more aware of gasoline prices because they kind of see it more often and they're less opaque. But on the other hand, everybody has, or a lot of people have heard about AI, and a lot of people, yes, are paying attention to power prices that are rising. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? I mean, basically, let's step back for a second. For about 15 years or more, demand for electricity in the U.S. had really basically been flat. Our appliances have become more efficient over time. Other aspects of our lives have become more efficient. But now there's kind of a lot of things all kind of rowing in the same direction that are pushing up power demand and putting some real strains on the grid and, pushing up electricity prices. So one of them are these data centers that we've all been hearing so much about. I mean, data centers for certain uses have been around for many, many years, right? To store photos, process payments, email, blah, blah, blah. But to train and then to ask questions to these large language models, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, all these kinds of things, you just need, these are not your grandparents' data centers, right? These are these massive facilities that these tech companies are increasingly building. And to just give a sense of scale, because this can get a little bit abstract, most existing data centers for, kind of more common uses or familiar uses are all, typically under 50 megawatts, right? Almost every one of these big data centers in the development pipeline is way north of that. Some are even on what would be known as the gigawatt scale. And to make that less abstract, a gigawatt is enough energy to sort of power hundreds of thousands of homes, right? So when these big tech giants are developing some of these facilities, you can almost think of it as kind of like putting a town's worth of energy demand in a town, right? Or it is a small city in a small city. So yeah, to bring it back around, electricity prices are rising partially because of these data centers, partially because we have a bunch of new manufacturing in the country, but also partially because our grid is just getting old and we need a lot of upgrades. Part of it is, yes, climate change, right? We have much more extreme, or somewhat more extreme, I don't want to overstate it, but, heat waves have gotten worse, and so that pushes up demand for power. And so for a lot of reasons, electricity bills are rising, and we are starting to see a real political backlash to that.
Yeah, we really are. And Donald Trump's all in on artificial intelligence and all in on these chips, which means he's all in on data centers, right? Because to have the data centers run, you have to have the chips. And to have the chips, you have to have the data centers run where it sucks up all the energy. Go back for a second, Ben. Let's talk about gas for a second, because gas, you said, is down. And gas in the Midwest is, I think I filled up the other day, I was like $2.60, $2.50, whatever it was. So gas has really plummeted. That leads me to believe that the economy is slowing down a little bit and there's not so much demand for gas. But what's going on with gas prices?
Yeah, I mean, so the thing to keep in mind with gasoline prices are that they can never be untethered from crude oil prices, right? And crude oil prices are, they differ a little bit depending on the grade and the region, but generally that is a global commodity, right? And so from a sort of global standpoint, supply is really just, going up more quickly. Production worldwide, including in the U.S., is going up more quickly than demand is growing, right? And yes, and part of that is sort of an economic slowdown story. Part of that is because basically you've got kind of a contest going on, right? You've got shale producers who are in the U.S. who are continuing to increase their production. It's not going as quickly up as it perhaps once did, but it's still going up. OPEC is trying to regain some market share. So it has been returning some barrels to the market on a monthly basis after a bunch of years of real restraint. So essentially you've got kind of a supply glut in the market, and that is filtering down all the way through to these gasoline prices in the U.S. as oil prices kind of, stick around in a fairly modest range, depending on the day. The West Texas Intermediate, which is kind of the main U.S. grade, that's hanging out in the maybe 58, 59, 60 range. Brent crude, which is kind of the global benchmark, that's usually $3, $4, $5 higher. But so, yeah, the Energy Department stats arm is predicting that gasoline prices will average, around $3 a gallon on a kind of nationwide basis. Now, no pun intended, your mileage may vary, right? It's a very regional thing depending on what kind of refinery. I mean, refineries run different grades of crude, and those different grades of crude cost different things. So it really kind of all depends on the sort of more regionalized infrastructure, but on a kind of aggregate overall basis, gasoline prices are heading down. Electricity prices are heading up. Now, hold on a second.
Hold on a second. Ben, hold on a second. I got to take a break, but I want to ask you a quick question about today and the taking of this Venezuela oil tanker. I know it's Absolutely. A one-off, but do you see that affecting gas prices and or the sort of oil futures going haywire because of the panic of that move today?
So surprisingly enough, typically you hear this term geopolitical risk premium, and whenever there is a kind of hot conflict anywhere in an oil-producing region, now Venezuela's production has been really depressed for years because it's a very mismanaged system. But that said, anytime you have this kind of conflict, you would expect prices to sort of shoot way up. The reaction today was really, really modest, and I think that's probably a result of two things. One is that Venezuela, while having the potential to be a much larger player in the markets, just really their production is just really kind of cratered over the last few decades. And, at this point, I'm kind of looking into trying to read the trader hive mind. But the absence of a big escalation in prices also, and again, this could change by the minute, but the absence of a big jump up in price, there was a modest jump up, but not a big one, suggests that traders don't necessarily see a massive escalation of this conflict. Now, contrast that with what the president has been saying about, wanting the Maduro regime to go. So I don't know how kind of hot and military this could get, but for the moment, sort of trader hive mind, if you will, is not exactly freaking out.
Ben Geman is an energy reporter with Axios. We're talking about energy. We're talking about data centers and your energy bill. More with him in a moment. Now, these statements I'm about to mention and products have not been evaluated by the FDA. The products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or condition. What am I talking about? Holiday parties, family dinners, everything else for the holiday season. It's likely we're all going to go overindulge this holiday season. Heavy meals, the occasional second drink, the occasional third drink. How's your liver going to hold up this holiday season? Thank goodness we have Active Liver from New Nordic. If you're feeling low energy, bloated, those could be signs that your liver needs some love. Help give it what it needs with Active Liver from New Nordic. It's a simple way to help you give your liver this daily shot of extra support that you can actually enjoy the holidays. Made with turmeric, milk thistle, and global artichoke extract, natural ingredients show in some studies that supporting your liver and helping your body clear out the toxins from alcohol and rich foods. It's Active Liver from New Nordic. And your active liver and your liver needs the relief, and you can get through the holidays with Active Liver from New Nordic. Active Liver can be found on Amazon, Vitacost.com, iHerb, and in stores at CVS, Meijer Grocery, and ShopRite. America at Night. Back in a moment.
Live from coast to coast, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Relax. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, you want to know what's going on with your energy bills? Ben Geman is our guest. He's an energy reporter for Axios. He's also the co-author of the daily Axios Futures Energy newsletter. You can download that and check that every single day. Axios.com. Ben Geman, our guest. Ben, let's talk data centers, because they say it's going to affect and suck some energy from the grid in your neighborhood, in your area. Do they have any idea how much? Are they in the ballpark? Or is this wild speculation that they don't even know what they're building until they actually build it?
So I would say I would split the baby a little bit and call it informed speculation. You know, everybody knows that data centers are, especially these powerful AI data centers that need, again, massive, these very specialized, powerful chips, just kind of train and use these big language models, right? So everybody agrees that they are taking up an increasing amount of electricity. How much that's going to go up? Gosh, the guesses, or I should say the analyses and estimates, are all over the place. Just to give you one, I suppose, kind of reference point, the Energy Department did a really closely watched study late last year, and what they concluded was that right now data centers, and by the way, most of this is just kind of the old school type data centers. The AI ones are coming online fast, but this isn't the kind of biggest part yet. But right now, data centers are maybe 3-4% of U.S. electricity demand. By 2028, so this is not, the distant future, that could jump to have them be somewhere between around 6 to 7%, maybe as high as 12% of U.S. electricity demand by late this decade. And most of that is from the fact that you've got these massive new AI data centers coming online. So that is a lot of growth, right? From just a few percent of U.S. electricity demand all the way up to maybe 6, 7, up to 12 or 13%. And again, this is coming at a time when other things are pushing up U.S. electricity demand as well. And so that is putting a lot of pressure on the tech industry to figure out some solutions here. And that is why you are seeing a lot of interest in small-scale nuclear reactors, although that's a ways off, that could connect to these data centers or even also feed local grids. You had this big case when 3 Mile Island, not the damaged reactor, but the other one there that had been shut down at a time when U.S. power demand was pretty flat. Microsoft is essentially sponsoring or helping to pay for some of the upgrades there to bring one of those reactors back online. Now, that power would go back into sort of the regional ocean of electricity, if you will, but, it's kind of exemplifies how the big tech companies do just want.
So let me ask you this question, Ben Geman. I think I still got you. Did we lose you there, or we still got you? He dropped. He didn't pay his energy bills. He didn't pay his phone bill. We'll try to get Ben on here in a second, because this is really good. He's an energy reporter with Axios, and Axios is a great news source for you. Axios.com. They do daily features, and they sort of drill down on some of these bigger topics, and energy is one of them. Ben Geman, our guest. We're going to try and get him on here for a minute. Do we have him back yet? All right, we'll do that. Let me... Normally, I would go to a break, but because this is a network show, I can't break, so I got to keep talking until we get him back on. Second half of this hour, we're going to check in with retired CIA officer and a Latin American expert on this Venezuela story. All right, Ben, good. Thanks for joining us. We got about 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
Let's talk about these AI centers or these data centers, because you keep hearing, they keep floating these ideas like, oh, we're going to go solar, we're going to go wind, and we're going to be self-sufficient by the time we're up and running. Is that pie in the sky, or is that a legitimate chance to sort of get these data centers running on solar and wind and everything else?
So it's not pie in the sky, but it's nowhere near the complete picture, right? I mean, we are going to need everything we've got to meet the increases in demand for U.S. electricity in the future. So, yes, we are going to need more wind and solar coming online, and oftentimes those are the fastest facilities to come online. But, they're intermittent as well. So we're going to need more batteries. We're going to need more natural gas. We're going to need existing nuclear plants to stay online and even bring some nuclear plants back online. Going even further out, we're going to need new nuclear plants as well. We're going to need it all. So renewables are going to be part of the equation, but not the whole equation. I will say that the big tech companies years ago all made these really aggressive commitments on climate change, and so they are very interested in procuring low carbon power. But that said, they're also interested in taking whatever they can get, whether that is natural gas as well. So it's not pie in the sky to think of it's not pie in the sky to think of renewables as part of the solution, but emphasis on the word part there.
Okay, I got 1 minute left. You keep throwing nuclear out. A lot of people get very nervous when you talk about nuclear. Is that coming one way, shape, or form?
Yeah, so it's coming in two different ways. One is that some existing plants are going to stay online longer than they otherwise would have. Part two is that we're going to have some plants that had been shuttered coming back online. Like I said, that one reactor at 3 Mile Island that wasn't damaged. There's some others as well. And then longer term, there's a lot of interest in these kind of small-scale nuclear reactors that a lot of startups are rushing to develop and a lot of the tech companies have partnerships with. Some people think that some of those could start coming online maybe around the end of this decade. I think more realistic estimates are probably in the kind of 2032, 3, 4, 5 range. So that's coming, but whether that becomes a big part of the solution or just kind of a boutique thing is what's really unknown right now. So it's a part of the solution, but I wouldn't expect it to be a silver bullet.
Energy reporter from Axios, Ben Geman. Ben, thanks for sticking with us today. Great stuff. Keep your phone on. We'll call you back when needed. Have a good day.
Thanks for having me on. Have a nice night. Take care.
You got it. Ben Geman with Axios, Axios.com. Sign up today. McGraw Milhaven, America at Night. Back in a moment. We'll talk this Venezuelan oil tanker next on America at Night.
This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Well, you probably heard the news that it was announced at the White House today that President Trump said that a large tanker, very large tanker, without any elaboration, said that other things were happening. The military took a large Venezuelan tanker. When asked who's going to own the oil, President Trump said, well, we'll keep it, I guess. He said, we seized it for a very good reason. So the U.S. seizes an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. We have an expert for you to talk all about this. Seems like it was out of the blue, but it's been escalating. Rick de la Torre is the CEO and founder of Tower Strategy. He is retired CIA, and he was the chief of station in Caracas, Venezuela for a long time. Rick, thank you for taking time on a busy day for us.
Thanks for having me.
Explain this to me. What happened today and why did it happen?
Oh, well, I mean, we just seized one of the largest sanctioned tankers tied to Venezuelan oil. And that's not just symbolic. This is a direct strike on the dark economy that keeps Maduro and his cronies afloat. Now, Venezuela is crying piracy, right? That's what they'll say, but Let's be honest here. These tankers operate in the shadows, for a specific reason. And this regime likes to use these ghost fleets and front companies, and they bypass sanctions and they move the oil under the radar. And what's happened is Washington finally cut one of those lines off.
Do we own the oil? Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, no. I was going to say, I think this is one of the clearest signs yet that this administration is really tightening that vice. And when you target the illicit revenue networks, you hit the regime where it really hurts. So look, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to get into who owns the oil internationally or the whole thing. But it's clear that they were, that the parties involved were in violations of sanctions. And by the way, these are authorities that have been around, even prior to this administration and the Biden administration, because of the U.S. sanctions that we've placed on Venezuela. So it's only been now that we've had the guts to actually do something about it.
So they released the video. It seemed like it was relatively, I don't want to say easy, but non-violent. There was no.
Oh, yeah.
There was no gunfire. There was no fighting back. They just acquiesced and gave up the ship.
Right. Well, I mean, tankers and merchant ships, normally aren't allowed to carry weapons, even to kind of protect themselves. That's one of the reasons why Somali pirates love tanker ships. So there's really not much of a resistance. And a lot of these ships also are usually undergo routine inspections when they get close to other countries' waters. So the folks on board the ship are perfectly prepared, that they know what's happening, and when they're signaled to stop their engines and to allow boarding, they comply, because they know it's not a good thing not to comply.
Yeah. Venezuela, it's been said, has drastically reduced their oil exports. That's part of the sanctions. And talk about how this is sort of, you mentioned off the grid, black market. I mean, how many tankers are getting through like this?
Well, it's what's sustaining their economy, and quite a few. I think what you'll see is those numbers have been shrinking. But for the longest time, the routes were rather simple. Oil would go to refineries in the Middle East and profit the Iranian regime. Oil would be donated and given to the Cuban regime also. So a lot of his debts he would settle with barrels of oil. And deliver them to the people who had extended credit. So whether that was China or Iran or Cuba or other parties, that's one way he kept his economy afloat for the longest time. Because if you look at his oil and you compare it to others' oils, yeah, he may have a very large oil reserve, but the quality of the oil in Venezuela is a very poor quality. It's almost like tar if you pull it out of the ground. It's almost a solid. So it takes a lot of processing, a lot of chemicals to break that down into something that's usable. And therefore, his barrels of oil always sell at a discount compared to, like, say, U.S. sweet crude or something. So it's unsustainable, and his oil prices continue to be relatively low. He's going to get even less money. And now with the sanctions and the inability to move currencies or finance these things appropriately, it's going to be a real issue.
So why would Iran want Venezuelan oil? Don't they have their own oil?
Right, correct, right. So yes, but what they need to do is refine that Venezuelan oil, right, and then get that out into the market. So since Venezuela itself really can't take that really garbage oil that they have, like I said, it's almost a solid. It's very difficult for them to turn that into something that's viable, in the open marketplace. Maybe asphalt. People who buy asphalt, the quality of the oil they produce is about as good as asphalt, and that's what it's used for, actually. So in other words, they send their crude to Iran, along with oil and minerals and whatever else that they can send to Iran. Iran then takes that crude oil. They'll run it through their refineries or other countries' refineries where they have an existing relationship with, and then they'll put that back out on the market again, because oil is a commodity, and that goes back to your question too about, well, who does the oil belong to? Sometimes when one of these tankers leaves a port, that oil will change hands, half a dozen times between different parties before it actually goes anyplace. So,
no, I get it. Yeah, it's a commodity, and it's ultimately you don't know where the gas that you're putting into your car comes from on any given basis, because it's a world market and it goes all over the place.
Correct.
Rick De La Torre is our guest, CEO and founder of Tower Strategy. He's a retired CIA, spent a lot of time in Venezuela as the chief of station. President Trump has sort of alluded to it, insinuated it, hinted at it, maybe even more. He wants regime change. He wants a Maduro to go away. He's tightening the screws. Our history, we can get him out. It's awful hard getting new people in, though. Talk a moment about our strategy here. What is he thinking about doing, and what is he trying to do, in your opinion?
Well, yeah, look, I think the U.S. position was clear during Trump 1.0. We lost the focus during the Biden administration, and now we're refocused again because it's only gotten worse, horribly worse. Over the last 10 or so years that Maduro's has really gone off the deep end, what he's done is he's created an environment where he's extended a welcoming mat to all our adversaries, to Iran, China, Russia, and they've taken advantage of that. They've used Venezuela as a aircraft carrier and dominate the region. And that, obviously, we don't want that in our hemisphere, right? And what that means. So we have Chinese and Russian, communications and military folk and arms sales, the destabilization of some of the democracies throughout our hemisphere. So it's all bad news all around. Now compound that then with the immigration issues. I mean, there's millions of Venezuelans that have left over the last decade or so, and are living in a lot of the countries bordering Venezuela. Not to mention, I think we have close to 800,000 or 1 million living here in the United States. So that in itself is also a very strong destabilizing power, right? And Maduro's known that for years. One of the things he used to do during the Biden administration was he would threaten, and this is classic playbook, from the Cubans. He would threaten the U.S. administration that if he didn't get his way, he would just, open the gates and let Venezuelans, swamp the U.S. border. And sometimes, especially under the Biden administration, they would equivocate and they would pacify him. And he's not a guy you could do business with in any way, right? I know some people say, well, you can negotiate with him. There are countless of deals that he's decided to, that he has said that he'd abide by, whether that was kidnapping Americans, whether that was curbing the flow of drugs or immigration, holding elections, honoring those elections, and he's broken every promise at every step. I think, one time he promised that he, after releasing a series of hostages, of U.S. hostages, he promised he wouldn't do it again. And I think it took less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
So
seizing one boat, shooting a couple of trollers out of the water. Are we really tightening the noose, or is this going to make him move? He sounds like he's going to sort of stand up to this sort of light pressure. It seems like he would need a lot more pressure to sort of go away and or step down.
Well, I obviously. I'll defer to our war fighters and our intelligence community and the office of the president to decide the timeline and also what they mean by increased pressure. The noose is tightening, and it has continued to tighten, daily or weekly over the last 2 or 3 months. What's happened too is Maduro over the last few years has done a really good job of thinning out and calling anyone who could be a threat to him, either within the military or his inner circle. And then those that are in his inner circle, close to him, Vladimiro, Delcy, and others, what he's done is they've got blood on their hands too. They're just as guilty. So what that means is, if we're waiting for someone within his inner circle to conduct, a coup d'état or overthrow him or turn him over to U.S. authorities, I don't think that's really going to happen, because they're just as guilty too. And if we're waiting for him to, take the off ramp and take a deal or go to wherever, Russia or to Spain or any other place that would grant him exile, I don't think they're going to let him out. I don't think his inner circle is going to allow him to do that, because they're like, hey, once you leave this place, then we're the ones who are going to have to face U.S. justice. So it's an interesting, predicament to see how this is going to play out. Obviously, we've got all the cards, we've got all the power, and it's just a matter of time before either we execute on that, or he does the right thing and either tries to flee or turn himself over to U.S. authorities somehow.
I know this is an impossible question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you see more ships being seized in the near future? I mean, it's
certainly something we could do. Yeah. I mean, look. I was in the Navy during the Second Persian Gulf War, and I served in the Mediterranean. We were looking for Ba'athis, and who knows, maybe Saddam Hussein hiding in a ship somewhere. And so boarding ships is something the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Coast Guard does routinely, quickly, effectively, safely. That's not an issue. So yeah, I think anyone who's sending out an oil tanker and is invested in that, right? They've invested in sending out a ship, a crew, to pick up oil, and then they've usually sold that oil before they even pick it up. Those investors are going to think twice. They're really going to think about, is this what I want? My money tied up in U.S. courts for a decade or so before it gets resolved. Right.
Yeah, Rick De La Torre, really interesting stuff. And I didn't know, that was really interesting about the Venezuelan oil. You hear about all those oil fields, but are there some oil fields that are better than other, or is it all pretty much sludge?
In Venezuela, no. In Venezuela, it's pretty much sludge. But God has a weird sense of humor. I've always thought, because he puts all the rare earth and critical minerals in countries that are just horrible, like China. But one shining example is their neighbor, Guyana. Guyana and ExxonMobil and their platforms off the coast of Guyana, which is something is contested. Maduro's been trying to get his hands on that oil for the longest time. That's exceptional oil. That is sweet, crude. It takes very little to refine. ExxonMobil and the other companies that work with the government of Guyana to extract that oil do it safely, do it with with every environmental practice in mind. And they get that onto the market properly. But yeah, Venezuela has just been cursed with really bad oil, very high sulfur content. It takes a lot of naphtha and other products to break it down and to make it a fluid.
Interesting. That is Rick De La Torre, is CEO and founder of Tower Strategies, retired CIA, and at one point was the chief of station in Caracas, Venezuela. Rick, thank you very much for your insights. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you.
You got it. McGraw Milhaven, America at Night. Back in a moment.
From the heart of America, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Join the nightly conversation, America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, let's try and squeeze in a couple of phone calls here. Jim in Naperville, Illinois. Jim, welcome to America at Night.
McGraw, thank you for the opportunity. Listen, I'm so happy that they're taking these tankers out of sea instead of in port, so that there's little that they're protecting the assets for the next regime that's going to be in there that's going to be much, much better, and that there won't be any environmental damage when there are any attacks, and we don't have to deal with somebody like a Saddam Hussein back in '91 who took out a scorched earth policy with his when we started invading his nation, to take him out and start burning his own oil fields.
Yeah,
we don't need that kind of damage.
You hope that if he goes and we take him out, the hope is we put in somebody better. That always hasn't been the case. Regime change hasn't really worked out for the United States over the course of our history. But, Jim, I appreciate the phone call. Let's try and squeeze in one more here. Paul in Boise, Idaho. I got about 1 minute. Go ahead. All right. So, fine. Be that way. I don't want to talk to you either. Just kidding. Just kidding. Hey, we had a good hour. We were talking about energy prices and artificial intelligence and these data centers. How about the one stat that Ben Geman gave us from Axios saying that right now, energy from these data centers, 1% to 2% of the energy grid is used for these data centers. What do you say? By 2028, it's going to be up to 12% of the energy created is going to go to these data centers. That is a marked, significant amount of energy for these data centers, which is clearly going to have effect on our energy bills. How much? Well, we just don't know. Paul, sorry, we ran out of time. We will get you back in the third hour when we take open phone calls if you want to stick around or call back in the third hour. Next hour, we're going to check in with a man who wrote a great book a number of years ago called Flags of Our Father. His father was one of the men who raised the flag at Iwo Jima. He's out with a new book, a novel this time. James Bradley is going to be our guest next hour. Stay right there. Our producer tonight, our executive producer is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night with Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, welcome back. Hour number 2. It's a Wednesday night, and I'm looking forward to this conversation with a New York Times bestselling author. His name is James Bradley, and, I don't know, we're going back a number of years. 20 years ago, he wrote a book called Flags of Our Fathers, and it told the story of his father, who was one of those famous Marines on Iwo Jima who helped raise that flag, that Pulitzer Prize-winning picture of the men raising the flag on Iwo Jima. That was one of his fathers. And later on in life, he set out to try and figure out life and figure out who his dad was and what happened, and that led him to Flags of Our Fathers. Turns out he's a great writer. He's written a number of books, and now he's out with a brand new novel just released called Precious Freedom, a novel. James Bradley, welcome to America at Night.
McGraw, thank you for having me.
I don't know if you remember this, but I interviewed you way back when you came to St. Louis.
I remember that.
Yeah, we had a whole tour stop and then a full auditorium, and you told such great stories and you spun such a great yarn, and Flags of Our Fathers did so well. I always remember that. I always had a soft spot in my heart for you, your father, and that story.
That was a fun gig we did.
Yeah. So now you've clearly got the writing bug, and I want you on as much to talk about this book, but about you yourself, because you yourself have a journey that's an interesting life, one in which a memoir's got to be not far down the road. But first, let's talk about this book, Precious Freedom. It's not World War II, it's Vietnam, and you really moved to Vietnam so you could research this book?
So Flags of Our Fathers is about my dad out in the Pacific. The U.S. Marines won, and I went and figured out what happened. That took me 5 years. And, the guys who won that war were in America, so I could interview them in America. There's nobody living on Iwo Jima. I did a little research in Japan, but the winners were in America. So the stories with the winners. I caddied for Vince Lombardi. You played baseball. We studied how the winners won. So I went to Vietnam, and first of all, in America, I read about 200-300 books on Vietnam, and it's all about how we lost, but we could have won. If you look at every documentary, it's like, if Johnson hadn't done this, and if the press hadn't done that, and if this, we could have won. And I went to Vietnam, and they won. So I started asking the winners how they won, and incredibly, I'm the only American author in 50 years who's ever gone to Vietnam and asked the winners, how did you win? And the stories were so different than the propaganda that I had been fed with in America that it took me 10 years to get it straight. Yes, I lived in Vietnam for over 10 years to get this book down.
It's a novel. You decided to turn it into a novel. After doing all that research, why didn't you stay with the nonfiction? Why did you go to the novel?
Well, okay, let's say we're talking baseball, and I've got a baseball team in L.A., St. Louis, and Long Island. And, with Iwo Jima, everybody was in one spot. And with my interviews in Vietnam, I interviewed the winners, and they were all over the place. So to bring their experience, I had to crunch it into a novel. Everything in the book is true. It's history as nonfiction. It's based on hundreds of interviews. But if you change one character or one scene, you have to call it a novel. But when you read it, you'll see that it's all true.
A lot of fiction writers say that they can hide a whole lot of truths in a novel, right? It's just easier to sort of tell the story. But everything in this story happened, might not have happened to that character at that second. Timelines might have changed. Conversations might have been made up. But you're saying everything in this book, Precious Freedom, actually happened.
Yes, sir. That, a Stephen King, he's making it up. What I did is went to Vietnam and interviewed hundreds of people. So when I had a 15-year-old girl with the same, two 15-year-old girls with the same experience in two different parts of Vietnam, it's unwieldy to tell. See, this is the surprise. Oliver Stone says about this book that if we knew what Bradley reveals what happened in 1969, we would not have gone to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm not talking about the whole Vietnam War, the helicopters in Saigon, 1975. No. 6 years before we technically lost the war, the civilians pushed the Marines out of their area of Vietnam. I was shocked. I went to where my brother served. And my brother's Marine base, they shut it down after 2 years in 1969. And the North Vietnamese army had never attacked them. Well, who beat the Marines in 1969? It was civilians. They said, Mr. Bradley, would you like to meet a famous sniper who killed 5 Marines? I said, yes, thinking some whiskey-drinking old grizzled man. I walk in the room, and it's a 65-year-old high school teacher, a woman. Hi, Mr. Bradley, would you like some tea? She's the famous sniper. There were girls in sandals trained in People's War who pushed the Marines out. That's this amazing story. My dad goes to Iwo Jima, and the Marines capture Iwo Jima. My brother goes to Vietnam, and they're pushed out by civilians.
And the argument, James, is that the civilians were fighting for their homeland, and so be like a teenager fighting for their hometown in America when somebody invaded from a different country? I mean, explain that. How does that happen?
Okay, you played baseball for Nebraska, right?
Yes, I did.
They had a team. They had a history. They had a way of doing things. So when they inserted you, you were just some talent from Long Island, but they had a system. Well, Vietnam, Their whole history, if you scratch it, which we didn't at that time, that's their whole history. We get invaded and then we beat the invader. The invader's always bigger than us, always technically more proficient. So if you're born Vietnamese, by the time you're 5, you know the Mongolians invaded, the Chinese invaded, we beat them, the Japanese came, the French came, the Americans came. That's the Vietnamese history. So it's like you going to the Green Bay Packers. You didn't invent it, but they have a history, and Vince Lombardi had a system. And Ho Chi Minh was the Vince Lombardi of Vietnam. And the opening scene of the book, Chip the Marine, 19 years old, shoots the father of May. And May is 15 years old. She doesn't know anything about America and war and fighting, but she saw somebody kill her dad. So she went to the forest and they trained her, just like you going to the University of Nebraska baseball team. They had a system and they systemized her. And she came out at the age of 15 with sandals on and killed 5 of the Marines whose names are on the Vietnam Memorial Wall. 15 years old, barefoot up in a tree. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Hold that thought. James Bradley, the book is called Precious Freedom. He, of course, if that name sounds familiar, he is the gentleman who wrote the New York Times bestselling book, Flags of Our Father, that Clint Eastwood turned into a major motion picture. His new novel, though steeped in fact, is called Precious Freedom. It's just out. We're just getting started. Lots more to ask him about, lots more to talk about. James Bradley, the author of Precious Freedom, America at Night. McGraw Milhaven, back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Welcome to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
James Bradley is our guest. His novel spent 10 years in Vietnam researching Precious Freedom. We're talking about it tonight. James Bradley, our guest. James, I know you've come at this from talking to the everyday people in Vietnam. Were they willing to talk about it? Were they happy to talk about it? What was the reception when you first got there and told them what you were trying to do?
Well, they were shocked. First of all, I couldn't tell them what I was trying to do. I wanted to talk to veterans and ask them how they won. And I'm the only guy who's ever done it. If you read the 300 books in America about the Vietnam War, it's about tactical excellence. We came in the helicopter, my buddy and I, and he got shot. If you look at the Ken Burns thing, it's about jets, but they don't get down to it. Well, if we did such a good job, how come we lost? It's like a quarterback, on a university in practice. He can throw a 100-yard pass every single time, but he doesn't win a game. So we were technically excellent, but we lost. So I went to Vietnam and said, how did you win? And I was the first one to ever do that. So it took 6 months of drinking tea before they opened the doors. And then they said, you can talk to these people. And they opened up to me. And I was shocked. The reason it took 10 years is because their strategies and techniques of how they beat Americans were completely different than what we are told. I'll give you one example. Can I give you an example?
Please do, yes.
Okay. Just go to the bookstore or go on Amazon and look at every single book about the Vietnam War. 99% will have the helicopter on the front. Listen to a Ken Burns documentary. It starts foop, 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 helicopter noise. The helicopter is the symbol of American strength in the Vietnam War. So I go to Vietnam and I'm talking to Vietnamese and they said, oh, thank God for the helicopter, Mr. Bradley. And I said, thank God for the, what are you talking about? And they said, oh man, the helicopter was key to us winning. I said, what are you talking about? They said, well, see, we didn't have an Air Force. So before your helicopter came to our county, a jet or another helicopter would come and drop a bomb to create a landing zone. So you conveniently marked exactly where you were going to land your Marines. And then when the helicopter came, we could see it for miles away. The sky was empty. It was quiet. We had no industry. Oh, thump, 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 thump. Here comes the helicopter. We know where it's going to land. So guess what, McGraw? You and I are each 15 years old with an old French rifle. I think you could position yourself behind a tree in the grass. I mean, you could handle that, right? You know where the Americans are going to land. So guess what? I asked my brother, what happened to you in Vietnam? Well, he got expensively trained. It must have cost a fortune to train a Marine back then. Ship him all the way across the Pacific to Da Nang, fly him up to the Dong Hai base. He got in a helicopter, his first mission. They opened the helicopter door, and guess what? He got a bullet right next to the heart and almost died. Well, he probably got shot by a 12-year-old. We made it so easy. The helicopters, thank God for the helicopter, Mr. Bradley. This idea, war is about secrecy, stealth. If you and I are 15 years old, we want to sneak up on somebody in the alley, right? You want to get them, surprise them. You want to it's called gaining the initiative. You want to surprise tactics, get them from the left, hit them when they're not looking, keep them off balance. Well, the Marines announced, here we come. We're moving out with 30 guys. We all have helmets. We're making a tremendous amount of noise. We got helicopters. We have armed, and they went out in bunches. The Marines couldn't walk around alone.
That has been, I don't mean to steal your thunder, but well documented, right? I mean, many people have said when you went to Vietnam, you didn't know who the good guys were and who the bad guys were. And sometimes the good guys were the bad guys, and sometimes the bad guys were the good guys. And so they didn't know who they were shooting at half the time. I mean, that's been well documented, hasn't it?
No, that's a different subject. What I'm saying is every time we went out on a mission, we were telegraphing where we were going so they could pre-position. Show me the documentary on that. Show me that, we don't say the helicopter was a big mistake. Now, as far as not knowing who the enemy was, this is people's war. People's war, they have a saying. Mr. Bradley, have you ever heard the Vietnamese saying that when the foreigner steps 1 foot on the ground of Vietnam, everyone stands up, including the women? Now, we imagine, we sent fighters with guns, right? So we imagine the opposition has a gun. So we walked by that toothless grandmother. She's not in the war. We walked by the little market girl. No. The toothless grandmother was the intelligence net. They had millions of grandmothers around the country who were memorizing everything Americans did and reporting it to the Viet Cong, who would come down at night and write down what they said and interview them. That little market girl with the vegetables on her head smiling at the Marine sentry, she was moving messages from one general to another. Everybody was fighting the war. So America, these are friendlies. This is a maid on our base, and this is a barber on our base, and, this is a friendly. And no. Ho Chi Minh said we're all fighting. Every home is a battle station. And we didn't conceive of it that way. McGraw, we had guys on base. Here, let me put it this way. We didn't win one day of that war. The debate in America is how did we lose? We never won one day. Every single day, the bases had to retreat. Everybody had to come in. You got to put the barbed wire around. If you're out in the field, you had to dig a hole, put barbed wire around, put sentries. We retreated off the battlefield every single day. And a Viet Cong said to me, all those films that you watch of Ken Burns? I said, yeah. He said, you don't see me in those films. I said, what do you mean? He said, we didn't fight during the day. Ho Chi Minh said, don't fight during the day. The Americans they control the air. That's stupid. I said, what? He said, we slept during the day while the Marines were out sweating. He said, almost everything we did was at night. It's easy to be dominant at night. So they were fighting at night. So you retreat to your base, McGraw, and there's guys trained like spiders to go through your minefield, disconnect everything, say, okay, it's okay now. And then Maybe you didn't get killed in your base. You're inside, but you heard the gunfire. You heard the mortar rockets. One of your friends got killed. You didn't have a good night's sleep. When you woke up the next morning, you had to clear the minefield. It was too dangerous to walk.
James Bradley, hold that thought. The book is called Precious Freedom. He, of course, the #1 New York Times bestselling author from Flags of Our Fathers, is out with a new novel, 10 years in the making, researched about the Vietnam War, called Precious Freedom. James Bradley, McGraw Milhaven, America at Night. Back in a moment.
Coming to you from the heart of the nation, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
James Bradley is our guest. His brand new book is called Precious Freedom, from the New York Times best-selling author James Bradley. James, the book's been out less than a month. What's the reaction been since it's been out?
Great. Look at the reviews. The first review on Amazon was that this is a masterpiece. I didn't write that. And the Vietnam Veterans Association said it's all here. You have to read it.
So let's talk about Ho Chi Minh for a moment, because I only know Vietnam from the history books, but it's sort of been portrayed in the history books that Ho Chi Minh was a modern-day Thomas Jefferson, right? He was trying to lead his people to freedom, and there were some early indications that he was reaching out to America to help Vietnam become free and to have a constitution and a Bill of Rights like the United States. And for whatever reason, we didn't respond. And then, a series of mishaps and, tragedies, we ended up fighting against Ho Chi Minh.
That's true. Ho Chi Minh stands up in front of 400,000 people. And early that morning, September 2, 1945, General Douglas MacArthur on the USS Missouri in the Bay of Tokyo said, "Asia is now free." So Ho Chi Minh stood up and said, "All men are created equal." And he quoted Thomas Jefferson. But Harry Truman, no. We don't mean Asians are free. We mean that the white man is free to come back to Asia. So Harry Truman helps the Dutch take over, go get back into Indonesia, and he helps the British take over Malaysia. And our military takes Japan. We fight Mao in the Chinese Civil War, and we fund the French to take over to go back into Vietnam, which they called Indochina. We did not fight for freedom in the Pacific. We fought for recolonization, if you look at the facts. And, a Vietnamese guy said to me, your Muhammad Ali agreed with Ho Chi Minh. They said the same thing. And I said, how did Muhammad Ali and Ho Chi Minh say the same thing? And he said, they both made it a moral case. Muhammad Ali said, I'm not going over there to bomb brown people. It's immoral. And Ho Chi Minh made it a moral case. The name of the book is Precious Freedom. And many, many, many veterans said to me, Mr. Bradley, no matter how horrible it was, Ho Chi Minh said, there's nothing more precious than freedom. They weren't fighting for communism. I couldn't find anybody to talk about communism. One Buffalo boy, you know, he was in his 70s, but he was 15 when he started fighting. He said, Mr. Bradley, I didn't have any shoes. I saw somebody shoot my father. He said, I didn't know anything about democracy and communism, and all I knew, you know, that's all politics I had to know when I saw an American shoot my mother. So, you know, this was not about communism. It was about Vietnam being free. And again, they are like the Green Bay Packers. They had just beaten the French, and before that, they beat the Japanese, and before that, they beat the Chinese and the Mongolians, and that's their history of being, you know, like Titletown, Green Bay. You know, they win football games. Well, in Vietnam, they know how to push out the invader. They've got the tools.
So interesting, right? Because the domino theory. Oh my goodness! If we don't stop communism in Vietnam, it's coming to America on the next ship. So we've got to go over there and stop communism. That was the premise that was sold to Americans, was it not?
Yes, sir. And if you look in the book, about half the book is about Americans. It's about this family in Minnesota who sends Chip as a Marine to Vietnam, and they start investigating, and they hear stories that are underneath the Walter Cronkite veneer. Now, I didn't know this. Commandant David Shoup, U.S. Marine Commandant David Shoup, 2 Medals of Honor in the Battle of Tarawa in the Pacific during World War II. He went across the country saying, Ho Chi Minh is the George Washington of Vietnam. There's no way we can beat Vietnam. He said they have a moral case. He said they're fighting at night and you know, and we come out during the day. He said that they are going to beat us. The last commandant of the United States Marine Corps was giving speeches to America. There is no way. And he said the domino theory is ridiculous. When Ho Chi Minh declared freedom for Vietnam, there was no China. China was involved in the Civil War. And China and Vietnam hates China. China is Vietnam's traditional enemy. And the domino theory said, oh, if we lose in South Vietnam, you know, China is going to take over Vietnam and then the communism will spread. Later in his life, screwed up Bob McNamara, the defense secretary, said, you know, the domino theory was never debated in the U.S. government.
Wow. And that's the man who wrote The Smartest Man in the Room, right? That's the guy who was the architect of the whole thing.
Yeah, he was the best and brightest, telling me and my dad and your dad and everybody, domino theory, Eisenhower, Kennedy, they all said domino theory. And then at the end, when there's a scene in the book where an American describes the domino theory to some 17-year-old Vietnamese boys, and they burst out laughing. They can't help themselves. We're going to fight for China? Don't you know anything about Vietnam? We're fighting for our backyards. We're not in some global fighting for the commies and China and Soviet Union. We're fighting to keep Vietnam free. That's it, period. Now look what happened. You know, Vietnam won, and there are like our third biggest international trader. Go to Vietnam. They're capitalists as can be.
That is true. Today, Vietnam is very much a trading partner with the United States. John Kerry, John McCain helped sort of open up Vietnam. There are businesses and factories opening up all over the place. It is more Americanized today than it's than anybody ever could have imagined, is it not?
Yeah, it's still Vietnam. I mean, it's a Vietnam system. We call it communism, but it's an emperor system. If you look for thousands of years in China and Vietnam, they have a father system, an emperor system. And there's a lot of feedback from the people. I saw riots in Vietnam. The Vietnamese leaders do something the people don't like, and the people come outside, protest. The leaders, change their policies. So it's very flexible. The 10 years I was there, McGraw, the individual income of the Vietnamese doubled. There is no girl in a miniskirt who worries about walking around at 2 a.m. in Ho Chi Minh City. The streets are safe. I was there 10 years. I never saw a homeless person. The only beggar I saw in Ho Chi Minh City was a German guy.
James Bradley, another question about LBJ. Is it not true that some of these things you're talking about got to him, and the famous scene in the Oval Office where they're telling him, look, you can't win this no matter what you do. We've got to change tactics. What we're doing, we're creating more enemies than we are friends. And he agrees with everything and then says, let's send another 100,000 troops to Vietnam?
Yes. Now, LBJ wasn't, see, you just described the situation in Vietnam. His eyes weren't on that. His eyes were on Congress in Washington. Why? Because Harry Truman got toppled with Who Lost China. And Who Lost China was not about China. It was about committees in Washington. Joe McCarthy, you're losing power, you're getting kicked out, voters. Johnson was only looking at Washington. And he thought, if I send another 100,000 troops, they won't say that I lost Vietnam. That's all he was focused on. He had no, if you look through the book, he never talks about winning. He talks about staving off losing. They didn't have a plan for winning. It was just send in another 100,000 or else we might lose, and then we'll lose the election in the committee. And, you know, it was totally political thinking. See, Johnson just, let me put it this way. Eisenhower said a military-industrial complex is dangerous. Jack Kennedy said to the military-industrial complex, you're not going to go to Vietnam. Then they put a bullet in his right temple, and Jackie saw it come out the back. And the next day, Johnson said, I'm not going to be the one to lose in Asia like Harry Truman did. And then at the Christmas party, 1 month after they shot John Kennedy, Johnson said to the Joint Chiefs of Staff with his Cutty Sark in his hand, he drank a bottle a day. He said, you give me my election and I'll give you your war. So Johnson just thought he had to give in to the military and it might last 2-3 months. You know, we'll just whip this thing. And to Johnson, it was like delegating a piece of paper, inbox, outbox. Let's build a bridge. Let's go to Vietnam. And the military told him, you know, this will be over in a year. Secretary of State Dean Rusk said, when we started bombing him, he smoked a cigarette and he said, we'll give Ho Chi Minh a little sting and then he'll negotiate. Well, Ho Chi Minh had told his people, America's going to bomb. Expect the destruction of all your cities and all your homes. Fight to the death. The Vietnamese were like ready to have the whole thing burned down. But Secretary of State, you know, oh, we'll bomb an oil plant and Ho Chi Minh will give up. Had no idea about the Vietnamese history.
James Bradley, we'll leave you with this. The book is called Precious Freedom. You wrote the book Flags of Our Father. Your father was on Iwo Jima. You're clearly a very patriotic man. But there are people who are listening to this, even still today, every time you say America lost and Vietnam won, it gnaws at them and they get angry just hearing that. What do you say to those people who hear you say that and get upset with that?
Why? I mean, when Vince Lombardi, when we lost the game, we weren't anger's not going to do anything. And you'll see in the book, the Chip shoots the father of May. May's 15. She says, I hate the Americans. And the guy instructing her says, don't hate. And she says, what do you mean don't hate? And he says, emotion will get in your way. We got to just get the Americans out of here. And the Vietnamese embrace Americans. Ho Chi Minh said, don't hate the Americans. What? They killed my father. No, the Americans are being lied to by their government. They're victims of the government just like you are. Have empathy with the Americans. Shoot them to get them out of here. So to those who are emotional about what I'm saying, I'd say suck it up. when I lost a football game, we studied how the winner won. What I'm asking, let's study how the winners won so we don't have 58,000 dead on another Vietnam memorial wall.
James Bradley, the book is called Precious Freedom. It is in bookstores everywhere. It's out this month. Precious Freedom, a novel, research for 10 years, and he says everything in it is true. He just turned it into a novel to tell a story. James Bradley, Precious Freedom, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for your honesty, and keep writing because you're a great writer, and I love reading it. So thanks for checking in.
Thank you, McGraw.
You got it. James Bradley, the book Precious Freedom. We'll come back and wrap things up. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven, where the nation comes to talk. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
James Bradley, the book is called Precious Freedom, if you are interested. All right, that's about going to do it for hour number 2. However, I got 2 more things, and then next hour we'll do all open phones for you. We'll throw it open, and something that happened in the news today. Lots going on around the country, around the world. We can get to all of it, chew on the fat. Some fun stories, some difficult stories. We've got the taking of this Venezuela tanker. You got Trump selling chips to China. You've got Republicans not happy with that. You've got Saudi Arabia and Qatar getting ready to own parts of CNN. So we'll get into all that as well. But I heard something funny today. I heard something called Whamageddon. Have you heard of this? Whamageddon? It's a game that these young whippersnappers are playing. It's a game out there, and it's called Whamageddon. And here's how you play. It starts on December 1st, and it runs through December 24th. And the idea is to see how long you can go without hearing the song from Wham! Last Christmas. Okay? So if you hear Last Christmas, now it isn't one note. It's not half the song. You have to recognize the song. So once you're like, oh, that's Last Christmas from Wham!, you're out of the game. It's called Whamageddon. And so it's a survival game of sorts. And it's being played just arbitrarily, right? You don't sign up. You don't pay $10 to play. You don't get a card. It's not even like on your honor system, really. It's just sort of your own personal game that is now sweeping the internet. Whamageddon. It's a survival game where you go without trying to hear Last Christmas, which is weird because you could be walking in a store and all of a sudden on the loudspeaker, on the music in the background, they start playing Last Christmas. You could be listening to a radio show and the engineer ends up playing Last Christmas as bumper music. Boom, you're out. Right? You're listening on your phone and you're on shuffle and they start playing Last Christmas. Boom, you're out. Whamageddon. God love you. People got nothing else to do. And then, well, you don't have to worry about this in Australia because they banned social media in Australia for everybody under the age of 16. Think about that for a second. They ban everything, TikTok, Facebook, you name it, whatever else they've come up with. Not allowed. Boom, you're done. And the fines, it's not like, they are if you're a social media company and you allow a 15-year-old on your site, there are serious consequences to it. What's interesting about this is not that they banned it, but that there are a number of other countries who are now following what's going on in Australia and very, very close to doing it themselves. Countries like Norway, Malaysia, are looking at this and saying, yeah, we see the destruction social media is having on our young children, and we're going to watch Australia, and we're right behind them. It's an interesting phenomenon. Might talk about that, too, next hour. Stay right there. Alex Hinton is our executive director. Our engineer tonight, who might play Last Christmas, is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, we're back. It's hour number 3, which is Open Phones on a Wednesday night here. America at Night, McGraw Milhaven, just like the lady said. The phone numbers are as follows: 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. A couple of interesting things I've learned doing the show now. We're a week and a half, 2 weeks into the show. We're keeping this last hour open for open phones, so we can sort of carve out some time for the listeners, because, one, I love listening to people who listen to the show. That's what radio does at its best, right? That sort of interaction with the audience. 2, we're finding out that a lot of people are calling at the end of the show, which means we run out of time and we can't get all the callers on the show. Now, we do our best, and I want to get as many people in as possible and, make your comments interesting and pithy and entertaining. And, yeah, absolutely, we'll put you on. Even if you're not, or you're trying to, or you got to, whatever. But the point is, if you're going to call or planning on calling or want to call or get all psyched up to a call, don't wait till the end of the hour, because I got a harder time getting you in. If you call earlier in the hour, then I have a little more time. We can massage the clock. You can take a little more time and explain yourself, but that's a little helpful hint along the way. But a lot of great response from the show, and I am thrilled. I'm honored beyond belief that we get to do this every night. So it is all about open phones. So here are the phone numbers: 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. I was told today that they are working their way through the text line. Corporate America being what it is today, I haven't really worked for a lot of big corporations. The couple of times I did work for big corporations, it didn't go so well. I guess I'm a small business type of guy. I don't really. It's not that I don't deal with authority well. It's just, when you're in corporations, there are procedures you have to follow. There are handbooks you have to follow. There's a pecking order you have to follow. And I try. It's not, I don't purposely go out of chain of command, but, I got to wait, and get 4 pieces of approval before I can, open up my desk drawer, or I could just open up my desk drawer, right? So letting the big corporation figure out how to get me the text line. So when it comes, it comes. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Until then, you're just going to have to call up. Do you have a question or a comment about our last guest, James Bradley, who wrote that really interesting book called Precious Freedom? I spent 10 years in Vietnam and then wrote a book, a novel, if you will, about the stories of Vietnam. And he hid the truth. He said it's all true. He had to take some liberties with names and dates and timelines and things like that, and take, one story happened to this person, one story happened to that person. So he just combined it and made the 2 stories happen to the same person. He said, but it's all true. And really interesting conversation with him. If you have any comments about that, we'd love to hear from you, or anything else. 1-844-2-McGraw. You heard about the Venezuelan tanker that is taken by the United States. And then there's another story where Ukraine has fired upon some Russian tankers. So Russia's under sanctions. They're sending their fleet out in some type of black market, dark market not allowed to be out their tanker, just like Venezuela is. And Ukraine apparently shot down some tankers, Russian tankers, in their ongoing war with Ukraine and Russia. So tankers are in the news tonight. Closer to home, in Michigan, some jaws are dropping in Michigan. Their coach, Sherrod Brown, was fired earlier today. Sherrod Moore was fired earlier today by Michigan. A short statement saying he had an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. This conduct clearly constitutes a violation of university policy. This university maintains a zero tolerance for such behavior. Fired. Okay, the guy's fired. That's curious. Then the next story is he was fired, and then police were called to his address of a female Michigan football staffer. According to police sent officers to the listed address of Sherrod Moore. He's now been arrested. The university says they found credible evidence that Coach Moore engaged in an inappropriate relationship and that now he's been arrested. And there seems to be some sort of incident that's taken place with a female staffer at her house. So was it assault? Was it something? Who knows? But this story's got, this has got the people in Michigan. Obviously, when the Michigan football coach gets fired and then arrested, a lot of people perk up and sort of want to know what's going on. So we'll get into all of that. All right, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Let's go to the phones. Tom in St. Louis. Tom, welcome to America at Night.
McGraw, I was listening to the author that you just had on, and he said something that really jumped out at me, and I've heard it a lot over the years regarding various places around the world. He said in Ho Chi Minh City, a woman can walk around at 2 a.m. in the morning and not worry about any crime or anything like that. And
yeah,
I've heard that about Singapore and other places, but the thing he doesn't talk about, though, is what freedoms and liberties do they give up to get that? I mean, if you want to live in a police state, sure, it'll be safe, but you're not free to do anything either.
Well, you're free to walk down the street. I mean, what do you mean? Like they're not allowed to carry a gun, or they're not allowed to?
Yeah, you probably can't carry guns. You can't do a lot of things. In Singapore, you spit gum on the ground, you get caned 15 times.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. I don't know. It's a good question.
It is true, actually.
Did you get caned for spitting gum on the ground? I don't know about that, but I get your point. I have traveled quite a bit in my days, and it's funny you bring that up because we were leaving Barcelona one night. Our plane was leaving at some ungodly number, and we had to get up at 3:00 in the morning. We took the car, or the bus, or the Uber to the airport in Barcelona at 3:00 in the morning, and there were parties and bars, and people were all out in the streets having a grand old time. And you went through a sort of district where you're like, oh my goodness, there's I would never walk down this street. And people were walking and talking and having a grand old time. I don't know if they're giving up freedom. It's just a different type of. It's a great question. I don't know if we really have the answer. I don't know if they're giving up freedoms. And I don't know if it's, they're not allowed to carry guns and people are dying to carry guns when you walk down the street in Amsterdam or Ho Chi Minh City. It's a good point. We do have much more violence in this country. That's just a fact. We have more random violence. We have more murders. We have more violent crimes than they do in other cities. I don't know. It's a great question. We also have school shootings here in this country, right? We don't have school shootings in other countries. We have mass shootings. We have these attacks these random mass shootings in markets and schools and, random places, McDonald's or whatever, fast food joints. But they don't have that in other countries. I don't know the answer to it. It's a great question.
Not just freedoms, but also, say you get arrested in this country, you get in, you have your Miranda rights, you have right to remain silent. Maybe in Ho Chi Minh City, when you get arrested, you have a right to maybe see the light of day in 2 or 3 weeks before they decide to talk to you. I don't know. I have no idea, but
yeah.
That's
Well, I know Spain. Spain has a functioning legal system where they don't, arrest you for nothing, and there's all sorts of rights along the way. Each country is obviously different. But I don't know if that's the case either, that we're soft on crime in this country over the last number of years. Look, we're cracking down on immigrants all over the place, and they're still coming into the country.
Yeah,
so,
true. Just the whole, kind of rubs me the wrong way when they throw that out there without kind of putting it all in context.
It's an interesting comment, and it's something to sort of dive into. Why is it that these other cities are, you can walk down the street in the middle of the night? Look, I've been in some interesting cities. I've been in Venice walking in the middle of the night. I've been in London walking down the street in the middle of the night. I was in Venice walking down the middle of the night by myself and my sisters. And, I was looking over behind every corner. I was convinced we were going to be mugged and everything else. We finally got to the hotel, and the person at the desk said, "What are you worried about? It's Venice. Nothing ever happens in Venice." I'm like, "I know, but there's nobody on the streets." The American in me came out, and I became overprotective, and they were laughing at me back at the hotel because they're like, "This is Venice. Nothing ever happens in Venice." So what do you know? Tom, thanks for the phone call. Appreciate it. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. That's how it works. Late night conversation. Nothing better. My whole radio career, I first broke in when I started board hopping for Art Bell. And Art Bell would take phone calls. He'd have the wild card line, take phone calls, most bizarre topics, strange off-the-wall topics. People would go rogue. They'd ask him something from 3 weeks ago or something he's never brought up. It was the best. And I ever said if I ever got a chance to do a national radio show, I would carve out time for phones. And so that's what we're doing. We're carving out time for phones. So whatever your trips your trigger, if you're a conversationalist, you got something, you can't sleep, whatever you're doing, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Call early. Don't call late. Back in a moment. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Live from coast to coast, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Coming to you from the heart of the nation, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Paul, you've been hanging on way too long. Welcome to America at Night. Paul from, where are you? Paul in Boise. Paul, good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Well, good morning. When I saw the little break on TV and they showed that the tanker had been taken over by Trump, and I thought of the USS Pueblo back in the Gulf of Tonkin, which kind of got the Vietnam War started, or an excuse for it, and it was kind of reminiscing about that, and I was glad no gunfire was extended, and
well, the U.S. Refresh my memory. The USS Pueblo was it was an intelligence ship that was overtaken by North Korea, right, in the late 60s.
Well, it wasn't North Korea. It was I'm sorry. You might be right. You might be right on that.
They took the hostages. They took hostages. They took American hostages. Right. Did they not? Or prisoners of war, or whatever you want to call them, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And they didn't let them out, and it caused an international incident. And I hear you. It's a little bit different. Taking a tanker versus taking over an intelligence ship and during an armed conflict. I guess I could two high seas. I thought of my first thought was, what's that going to do to the oil markets? But our first guest in
in our number one, if you missed it, it was really interesting. He's talking about how the Venezuelan oil is not very good. It's sludge. It needs extra refining. So it's not very well in demand. And they got to ship it to Iran to get it formulated so that it could land on the open market. And he said it's just not very good oil, and Venezuela's oil is their production has dropped quite a bit. It was an interesting conversation about Venezuela's oil, but the question remains, Paul. Thanks for the phone call. The question remains, what's Trump's strategy? What is he doing? Does he want regime change in Venezuela? Is that the goal here? Is he going to take more ships? Is he going to invade? I've heard military experts say he doesn't have enough troops to invade, but what is he trying to tighten the noose around Maduro? If he's such a bad guy, would he fold like a house of cards after one ship gets taken over? I'd love to know more of what the administration's strategy is and what their plan is, and then what they're right. They're kind of silent on all this. Paul, thanks for the phone call. Listen to this. Tony, I got about 2 minutes. You want to hold on through the break, or you got a 2-minute comment? Tony in Montreal, welcome to America at Night.
I can wait for the break. I'd rather wait for your break. Is that what? I don't know. Do you want me to go on now? Is that it?
No,
is that
you can wait for the break. Wait for the break. Tony, I'm going to put you back on hold. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-2-McGraw, or 1-844-262-4729. I got about a minute here. I want to talk to everybody who doesn't like Donald Trump. Everybody who doesn't like Donald Trump, no matter what he does, he can't win. I got a story for you in which you would have to like this story. SNAP, right? Women in SNAP benefits has announced that 6 more states have banned junk food from the Supplement Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP benefits. You're not allowed to use, right, federal funds for junk food. It's kind of like something Michelle Obama would have sort of floated, right? I mean, that's sort of like a nanny state, if you want to get negative, or a positive is America's not very healthy, so why should we allow those who are susceptible to use government funds to buy junk food, right? You use your own money to buy junk food, but if the government's going to give you some benefits, you should probably keep it on the healthier side. I mean, that's a Michelle Obama playbook, right? Meanwhile, Dr. Oz and RFK Jr. and the Trump administration, nanny state, or just smart. I think we can all agree with that, can't we? 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. America at Night, back in a moment.
This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. It's open phones. We got a couple of lines open for you right now. Don't wait to the last minute. Tony in Montreal, thanks for holding on through the break. Welcome to America at Night.
Yeah, you're so nice putting me on. I appreciate it. Thank you, McGraw. Non-compost Memphis, Kentucky rep Sarah Stalker says that white children must feel bad about being white because of white privilege. I call that pork pocket pigmentation politics or reverse victimization strategy. Why would a person born of a certain gender, color, language be responsible for slavery of 309 years ago. McGraw, I'm not a social engineer. I had to compete from a middle class background in a classroom. I had to compete on a football field, on a hockey rink, and it didn't matter what language the person spoke or what skin tone he had. It was just a competition, and it was friendly competition, and it wasn't malicious competition. It was just getting to the end result, which was teamwork and being part of a community. And anybody that predicates their entire career in education or in government by dividing society based on gender or any type of religion or any type of politics that's based on color of skin is pathetic. I mean,
all right, hold on a second, Tony. Let me play devil's advocate for a second. I don't know what you're talking about with this woman, and I people throw around white guilt and critical race theory, and I think I have an understanding of it, but it's somewhat convoluted. But let me play devil's advocate for a second. You mentioned sports, where sports is the great equalizer, right? Doesn't matter what color you are, no matter how brown, no matter how black, no matter how white, right? It's all based on skill and, it has nothing to do with the color of your skin or anything else. But let's take it out of sports. Let's talk about the great example of crack cocaine. And let's not talk about 300 years ago with slavery or 150 years ago with slavery. Let's talk about crack cocaine. Crack cocaine is predominantly affects the African-American community. Powdered cocaine was popular in the white community. And yet, if you were caught with crack cocaine, you got significantly bigger criminal penalties using crack cocaine than you did if you were using powdered cocaine. And so the white guilt or the critical race theory or the racism or the discrimination that exists today are things like that, where how come the crack cocaine person got significantly more criminal time than the powdered cocaine person? And I think that's what they talk about when they talk about white guilt, right? The white guy got off with a, rehab and 30 days in jail. The crack cocaine guy was caught with the same amounts or equal amounts or whatever else, right? They spent 5 years in jail. So it's not always apples to apples when it comes to the color of somebody's skin.
So my response to that is I practice constitutional law in Canada and criminal law. So you might be pushing the right button with me because I agree there is a differentiation in sentencing based upon a lot of things. And trust me, I don't want to say too much and get myself into trouble in Canada because you can't criticize judges at all, even if you're retired. So I can tell you honestly that I have a great distrust for the legal system. I was in it for 30 years, and I agree fully with what you're saying. But I also bring up this point. If we talk about prejudice or malice or whatever you want to call it or critical race theory, explain to me as a guy that knows sports, because you've been talking about how Jeff Kent gets into the Hall of Fame, on reconsideration, given that he had multiple incidents with Milton Bradley in Los Angeles. He had multiple issues with Latino players in Milwaukee, where he said certain things that were attributed to him, such as Latino players are easier to control than African Americans. And Milton Bradley said he disrespected me, which is a target or a toning word for other things that he didn't want to use to provoke, let's say, a thing. But I'm using that example and saying, why isn't Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame? If we want to talk about, a just playing field across the board, and you see a Jeff Kent who had reasonable batting average, 290, was a one-time MVP, and then you have Barry Bonds, the greatest baseball player, who beat Babe Ruth's record, which he got death threats about because Babe Ruth was a white icon, and Bonds had 7 MVPs, 4 in a row, and he was earning them early in his career before he was allegedly on steroids.
Tony, I'm going to let you go. I'll answer your question. Great point. Thank you for calling. I'm not cutting you off, but I got other phone calls and I got to get to them. So I individually, well, there's lots of to dissect there. But the reason why Barry Bonds isn't in the Hall of Fame is because of the perceived steroid use. And they're not letting anybody in. And Jeff Kent didn't have any perceived steroid use. Now, one could argue, right, arguing over who should or shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame is a great parlor game. It's never ending, right? You could argue all sorts of things. Barry Bonds clearly should be in because he had a Hall of Fame career ever before the perceived steroid issue came in. Greatest hitter of our time. Batted ninth, by the way, when he was playing at Arizona State, but that's a whole other issue. I think the sports writers aren't going to put him in because of the steroids. I think, if you're asking me, I think the living Hall of Fame members should decide on all of the steroid people. The Clemens, the McGuires, the Barry Bonds, the Rafael Palmeiro, all of them should be decided by the living members of the Hall of Fame. It's their club. They should decide whether or not these players who have been tainted by steroids are getting in. It has nothing to do with the color of the guy's skin. The guy was phenomenal. Tony, thanks for the phone call. All right, let's take another one here. I believe we've got another phone call here. We got Tyson. Tyson, thanks for joining us. Welcome to America at Night.
Well, thank you very much. I didn't call about this, but I wonder why we don't ban all the PED users just like they banned Pete Rose. Talk about affecting the game. Goodness gracious.
No, I hear you. I hear you. But what did you call about?
Well, you were talking about the SNAP benefits, and I'm not sure where you fall. Is it nanny state, or we should restrict them? Because I don't remember Michelle Obama ever suggesting they should be restricted as to what they can buy. I don't know why you're attributing it.
No. Okay, I'm sorry if I was short on time trying to get to a break. Michelle Obama was very much about get active and start eating healthy, right? And so she was sort of portraying that. But she was a lot of Democrats are criticized for the nanny state, right? Putting warning labels on sugar, or banning extra large or supersize or all those things, right? And they were perceived and criticized as, oh my goodness, this is the nanny state. But I would think Democrats were very much in favor of Michelle Obama with the get healthy and the let's start eating healthy and let's start kicking some of this junk food. Well, now you've got Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and you've got Dr. Oz doing that with SNAP benefits, right? They're now saying to states, if you restrict SNAP benefits from going to sodas and junk food and candies and all that stuff, we will give you more money. They are incentivizing states to stop offering junk food through these SNAP benefits. That is the definition of a nanny state, is it not? I mean, that they're trying to get people to eat healthier. And we can all agree with that. And that sounds like, even though she never came out and said we should restrict SNAP benefits, if she did, she would have been criticized by the Republicans, which is probably why she didn't do it. But now this is a form of the nanny state, right? Telling you, hey, you're not allowed to order supersize anymore. You're not allowed to order sugar drinks. You're not allowed to use those SNAP benefits for sugary snacks. If you want to buy that stuff, use your own money. Don't use taxpayer money to eat unhealthy foods. That was the point I was making, in that even though you might dislike everything about Trump and you're a Democrat, I think this is something Democrats would probably agree with.
Well, they can't because it's a Trump policy, but I wonder why. If
that was my point.
Why are you allowed to eat these foods even if you're spending your own money, if it's such a tax on our health system and health care? Why do they even exist? Why can anyone buy them?
Well, I mean, we tried that with alcohol. That didn't work, right? I mean, it's banning things doesn't work. Right? You ban cigarettes, what's going to happen? You ban alcohol, what's going to happen? Cocaine, meth, heroin, that's all illegal. You can find it on the streets wherever you go. So just because you ban it doesn't mean it's going to go away.
That's true. It doesn't, but I'm wondering why are we just picking on these poor people that are getting SNAP benefits? Like, you think you're morally superior?
Actually, I don't. I'm picking on poor people, telling them you can't buy junk food with your government subsidies. I don't think that's picking on poor people. It could be looked at, I guess, picking on them. It could be looked at, you're trying to encourage them to get healthy. And isn't that a good thing, to try and get people healthy?
Sure, I suppose that's a good thing. How much more does the healthy food cost?
More, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
Can they even afford the healthier food?
Well, I mean, if you're arguing, does it cost more for a bag of potato chips or an apple? I think an apple and a bag of potato chips, an apple is probably cheaper.
Well, that I don't know. Look. Not
to blow this whole conversation up. How often do you see bananas or apples at the supermarket or the convenience store, and you end up and you go and you get a Mounds bar, right? I mean, you have the choice, and the choice is, if you're using government money, you can buy the apple. You can't buy the Mounds bar. What's so terrible about that? That's not picking on poor people. That's just saying we've got a chronic problem in this country with obesity and diabetes. And if you're going to use government money, all we're going to say is you have to buy healthy food. I don't think that's that big of an ask. And I would think that if it was portrayed or floated by a Democrat, Democrats would be all for it. Republicans would be screaming nanny state. But since the Republicans are doing it, Democrats are against it because it's a Trump policy, and Republicans go along with it because it's a Trump policy. That was the only point. I got to go. Thanks for the phone call. I got to go. I'm short on break. I'm late for a break. I'll come back. Open phones, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's Open Phones, America at Night. I'm McGraw Milhaven. Back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven, where the nation comes to talk. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
All right, we're deep into open phones, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-2-McGraw. Let's try and get Larry in Houston. Larry, welcome to America at Night. Thanks for calling. Larry, are you there? Larry, I can't hear you. You're going to speak up or turn your radio down or something. Larry, for some reason we can't get you. Try and call back on a different line. Call back. Maybe we got a bad connection. Let's try. Is it Donnie in San Francisco? Donnie, good. Thanks for calling America at Night, Donnie.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Milhaven. How you doing?
Good. I'm doing good. Thanks for calling.
Hey, so I was, listening to your show. It's actually my first time hearing you guys. Just having to be driving this time, and you're talking about how no matter what decision is made or what side does what, the other side's going to villainize them, and everyone seems to jump on the bandwagon depending on which sideline you're supporting. Where I work, 10 different guys, you can get 10 different points of view. One of the guys just hates Trump no matter what he does. I asked him straight up, I go, hey, at this point, is there anything Trump can do, even if it's, no matter, no perspective, it's good, can you support it? And he straight up deliberately was like, no, I can't support anything that man does at this point.
Right.
And I'm curious, what, because it seems to be heading this way for a while now.
Yeah.
And what do you think, we continue to go down this road, what's the remedy? I mean, I know we can listen to each other. I know on a one-on-one basis I can talk to anyone from the left or the right, and I can, try to appreciate their perspective without them being overly offended. But just the generalization of everything just seems to be it doesn't leave room for any conversation from either side, you know. And
yeah. Well, Donnie, I think you. First of all, thank you. Yeah, Donnie. First of all, thank you for listening. Thank you for calling. We love it. Call back anytime. First of all, we've all experienced it, right? And it's the people who hate Trump no matter what. It's the people who couldn't agree with anything Joe Biden did, right? There were a group of people who, no matter what Obama did, it was all bad, right? You couldn't even have a conversation about health insurance because it was dead on arrival. You're absolutely right. As for if Trump brings it up, they're against it. But if Obama says the same thing, right, they're for it. It's hypocrisy all over the place. What's the future? It's a great question. In some ways, you say it can't get any worse. And then they were saying that during the Reagan era. Then they said that during the Clinton era, right? During the impeachment. Oh, my goodness, this can't get any worse. And then you said that during the Obama years. And then you said it during the Trump years. And then you said it during every 4 years, every 3 years. Oh, my goodness, it can't get any worse. Though they said that during the Civil War, though we had a Civil War over it. Right? They've been saying it since the Revolutionary War days. So in some ways, it's just America. We've always been at each other's throats. At some point, I would hope to believe that the fever would break and we'd sort of all come together and realize there's a lot more common ground, I would think, I would hope. Being constantly angry all day long is no way to live your life, just in terms of your own mental health. So you're asking me where I think we're going to go. I truly, honestly believe that the fever is going to break. People are going to realize, what are we arguing over? I can't talk to my brother anymore because he loves Biden and I like Trump. Is that really? I'm going to no longer I'm going to divorce my wife of 30 years because she's, one way and I'm the other, or I can't talk to my son or my daughter. I mean, think about that for a second. That's heartbreaking. So I would hope that we realize that for these people we send to Washington, it's a game for them. And we would smarten up and realize it's a game and it's our relationships with our loved ones is way more important. And our family and our coworkers and everybody else. Donnie, great phone call. Thanks for calling. Thanks for stumbling on the show. Hopefully you stick around. That's it for us. We're done for the day. Alex Hinton is our executive director. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night on Westwood One. Good night, everybody.